Johnny, thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. Um, can you tell me a little bit of how you got started with drones and what drew you to drones?
Well, the practical answer is that I, as a documentary photographer, was looking to add another arrow to my quiver. I really was just trying to compete against other documentary photographers in Cape Town, South Africa, where I lived in 2016 and still will live when I get back from the pandemic sort of weirdness. And there's a lot of people in the space. So I was trying to set myself apart. And 2016, February 2016, no one had a drone in South Africa. Well, I shouldn't say that. One guy did, and he made this amazing video called Cape Town 4K. And it got picked up, I forget, The Guardian or something, and it went viral. And I saw that and I went like, I can do that, basically. And I bought a drone in the States, actually, and brought it back to South Africa, a DJI Inspire 1, in a huge carrying case. I just saw a photo on Facebook of me with that case recently, and I was like, oh my God, because now I'm using like DJI Mavic 2 Pro or the Mavic Mini, which is actually what I have with me right now, which is like this big. And the Inspire 1, I mean, it could barely fit in the trunk of my car at the time. And I thought, let's try something new. And like for me, at least, I got really, really lucky with being in the right place at the right time, because Unequal Scenes, which is the inequality photo project that got really popular in 2016, was, I think, as much about using drones as a technology as it was about the subject matter of what I was taking photos of. So it was like that perfect mix of like right technology when people are interested in it at the right time for South Africa to be talking about inequality and sort of social justice seen from above.
Because that segues into the other question, like what got you started? What prompted you to get into Unequal Scenes and then kind of delve deeper into kind of grow it?
Again, okay, I'm passionate about the way that the world is set up. So like systems that make the world go around. I love photographing people working, and I love looking at maps. My dad was a map maker actually for the government, for NOAA. So he sailed around the world making maps for NOAA. And we always had like atlases around the house. So like moving to drone photography, actually, when I look back on it, was kind of an obvious move for someone like me who I mean, even though I like portraiture and have done portraiture and continue to do so, it always like naturally feels too close to me. Like I don't know, I like the distance that a drone gives you. So when I got the drone, again, because I was a documentary photographer, I wanted to do something different and like add a new technique to my photography. It felt very natural. And I should say, I went to Cape Town originally to study anthropology. So I had a like academic background and grounding in sort of spatial architecture, inequality, sort of the history of apartheid. And I knew from being an American that the way that Cape Town is set up is very strange and weird. Like we have inequality in America, of course, but it doesn't look like South Africa. South Africa is set up in an incredibly divided way, and like a planned divided way. But it's difficult to see on the ground. There's like fences and trees and stuff. You can't, as you're driving, really notice that one side of the road is shacks and one side of the road is like mansions. But because of the fact that Cape Town's kind of a hilly place, I knew that some of these places existed by seeing them on the road. And the first place was Lake Michelle. It's on the way of a place that I go surf. So every weekend I go surf at this one beach. And I thought, why don't I put the drone in the back of the car, see what it looks like? And as the drone went up into the air, it's never happened to me before or since, really. I got this feeling of like, oh my God, this photo is really coming together better than I ever hoped it would. And it appeared on my screen. I took the photo, put it onto my Facebook page that night, and then it went viral overnight. And that's literally how the whole project started, was this photo idea that I had going viral on Facebook and following it up with a second photo. So that's what I say to people when they ask me like, well, how can I create a viral photo project or whatever, which is like a ridiculous thing to give advice to, because who knows, it's like a combo of so many factors. But one thing that I did do well, I think, was right off the bat, position Unequal Scenes as a project, not as a single photo that I took, and then I'm kind of like forgetting, like, here it is, deal with it. Immediately I said, this is a photo project. There's more photos to come, and here's some research I've done so you can get more interested in the next photo that's coming down the pipeline. And releasing the photos in that sort of serial fashion was like really successful for the growth of the project.
And as it's grown, something I'm kind of fascinated more on the storytelling information, because it's expanded. You know, you started South Africa, and then you started, I think you went, you know, in other countries in Africa and southern part of Africa, to show the economic disparity and those kind of things. But you've moved, you know, you've brought it to North America, you've brought it, you know, all over the place. So, what, how did you get alerted to like Mexico City? How did you get alerted to these different areas? Or is it something you were just like, let's go explore?
Well, I'd say 50% of the success of Unequal Scenes is because um, I have a passion about revealing things that are systemic in the world through photography. And inequality, I feel pretty strongly that extreme economic inequality is a dangerous thing and a pernicious thing to sort of the long-term stability of society, right? So through research and through sort of my own studies and interests, I knew that, for example, Mexico City um, was extremely unequal. The country of Brazil is extremely unequal, and there's those famous photos of Brazil. The India, for example, is an example of sort of an up and coming economy that has incredible sort of disparities in the way that growth is being distributed. And then, of course, my own home country of the United States is the most unequal OECD 20 country, or rich country, which doesn't make any sense because it doesn't have to be that way, right? It's like not a developing country, it's a very developed country. Um, and so, but those things aren't enough when you're doing a photo project, right? You actually have to have someone hand you a plane ticket or money and say, go take these photos, because I didn't have any savings. Like, I was a struggling photographer, zero savings. And what I said earlier about being at the right place at the right time, exactly, because Thomson Reuters Foundation, which is, you know, Reuters is like a newswire service. Thomson Reuters Foundation is their charitable sort of arm. There was an editor there telling stories about land rights who saw my article in the Mail and Guardian in South Africa and said, why don't we hire this guy to do the drone work in this new project that I'm doing called Slumscapes, which was the world's 5 biggest slums. And I mean, long story short, I went to Mexico, India, South Africa, where I lived, and Kenya for that project, which gave me a reason to be in those countries and sort of journalistic cover to be able to do the project with a fixer and with a budget. And with the rights in place for me to be able to use those photos afterwards for my project. So it's kind of a combo of business and activism or art, which immediately sort of turned this. And that, by the way, immediately, I'm talking like within 3-4 months, turn this into a project where I could then say, I've been to 4 different countries, 5 or 6 or 7 different cities, I can't remember now. And like, this project is now a worldwide exploration of inequality, right? And the minute I could say that is when the fellowships started coming and the academic sort of respect started coming. And this is like mid 2016. By early 2017, I was being invited to speak at conferences as some sort of knowledgeable expert on inequality, which I very quickly had to become. So it was like this extreme process of accelerated, yeah, becoming a creative communicator in a topic that I was interested in, but didn't necessarily have like an academic background in, which, like I said, was a combo of luck and I suppose like being in the right place at the right time, which is
Right.
luck.
Right.
So
I was going
yeah.
to say it's the idea, sorry to interrupt, but it's the idea that, you know, you created it, so you already had the idea, like, let's see what it is. That initial shot of
Mhm.
Lake Michelle kind of went up and said, let's see this, and then kind of just riding that snowball as it kind of kind of went and just kind of
Yeah.
saw
And
that things could build off of that.
I've tried, well, you can be the judge, but I've tried to be humble throughout my career, and career with Unequal Scenes the last 4 years or 4.5 years here, because I don't want to like downplay the time and effort that I've put into this project. However, there are people who have been working to communicate inequality, or lifelong documentary photographers who haven't had the exposure that I've been lucky enough to have. And there is a huge component in that of using the drone technology, which people were fascinated by. They're less fascinated now in 2021, but in 2016, that's all anyone wanted to talk about was, like, drones are seen as these surveillance objects that the US military uses to drop bombs in Somalia. Like, are you sure you want to call your organization African Drone? We actually had that conversation. We almost called it, I forget what we almost called it, but it was something like African Sensor or Sky Africa or something, because we didn't want to say the word drone in 2016. It was still too touchy. That's how sort of quickly things have changed. But I have like become, I mean, not to put like myself on a pedestal or anything, but I have kind of become an expert in sort of inequality photography because of the fact that it's all I've been doing for 4 years. So Code for Africa is an organization based in Africa, and it's a charitable organization and NGO that has funded me for 4 years as a fellow to be able to work on not only creatively communicating issues, not just inequality, but urbanization issues in Africa and beyond, but allowed me to set up African Drone, which is my own NGO, which empowers African journalists and just average African citizens to understand their land through drone technology in a way that's never been possible before. Because, I mean, I don't know about you, but I really believe drones are like a profoundly democratic technology, in the sense that we never really had the ability to fly above our homes before without government intermediation or extreme wealth. I mean, 20 years ago, you would have needed to own a satellite or fly in an airplane or a helicopter to be able to see that view, right? And people can say, well, Google Earth, yeah, Google Earth is a private company, like one of the most richest companies on earth, that you're essentially borrowing technology from, and they can turn it off at any moment. Whereas this drone technology, you own your video and your photo, and it's now kind of moving down the path of more restrictions. But 3, 4, 5 years ago, there was very little that people could do to stop you to fly above your own home and map it. In Africa, that's really important. For example, for land tenure, a lot of people have never had their homes mapped. They've never, no government, sorry, a lot of governments have not mapped their own land the way that, for example, Western Europe or America has. And so a lot of people have a house on land that they can't prove that they own, so that they can't now borrow against that as collateral for a loan from a bank, for example, or get insurance to protect against a flood or a drought or whatever to protect their crops if they can't prove that they own their land. So there's like a truly profound democratic aspect to drone technology that's more than just pretty pictures and journalism, even though that's really important. And I don't want to minimize journalism and communication in terms of visual communication, but mapping, spectral analysis, like agricultural analysis, risk mitigation of stuff like floods, 3D generation of floodplains, like for example what they're doing in Tanzania. That's really exciting. So I just don't want people to forget that aspect of drone technology, just as fundamentally transforming our world as cell phones did.
Right. It's interesting because, we, being in the United States, especially in Southern California, that, we kind of don't see things with a global perspective, right?
Mhm.
And just because, whatever, we don't think we have to, we just don't think about it, whatever. We think about it, we don't really think about it. But the things that you're bringing up as far as the drone technology in being used in Africa as the democratic tool, right? As far as a tool to say, hey, this establishes property value, this does this. And, a lot of things that we tend to not see. You know, a lot of things we see like zip lines doing out in as far as with blood delivery and stuff in East Africa, um, and all these things that it's like, wow, you know, without that drone technology, progress can't be made, kind of a thing. And again, more established countries, we kind of take that for granted, but to see it and hear you talk about it and how that technology has evolved and how it incites progress and allows for, you know, establishment of and safety issues as far as, you know, floodplains and it's amazing, you know. Um,
And one thing to really celebrate as an American, and I'm assuming that your audience is mostly American here, is the fact that the US government, for all its faults and failings, spectacularly on display recently, is the world leader in allowing individuals and businesses to use drone technology to the maximization of its potential in the least regulated ecosystem in the world. And that's really something to celebrate. I think that sometimes when you're just working in America, you forget that. But I work all over the world, and the cumbersome regulations, laws, oversights, requirements, and cost. For example, in South Africa, where I've made my home for the last 8 years compared to America, is dramatic. I feel like it's a grab at control to try to wrest away this new democratic technology from the hands of citizens who might use it to expose things. And I don't think that's conspiratorial in places like, for example, Tanzania, Rwanda, South Africa, Nigeria, places that have a veneer of being drone friendly, but when you actually dive into it, it costs upwards of $30,000 to get certified to be a drone license, like to have a license to fly drones as a company in South Africa. It's about $3,000 to get your drone license. I know this because I've been through the process. Luckily, it was sponsored by Code for Africa, but that's not enough to fly drones legally. You have to then fly underneath what's called a what is it called? It's like a see, I'm going to screw up my whole sort of line of reasoning here, but there's a document. I've been out of South Africa for 10 months now, so I've forgotten a lot of things, but there's a document that you need to have, that a business can only have, that you need to fly underneath, like an umbrella. And that costs upwards of $30,000 and about 2 years of your time. So, and you've got to keep the business running for those 2 years, because it's got to be a viable business before they'll approve it at the CAA level, the Civil Aviation Authority level. And I've talked about this a lot for African drone. It's similar in a lot of other countries. For example, in Kenya, it's not so expensive, but there's a lot of capriciousness in terms of how things are enforced. So you might be on the receiving end of needing to pay a bribe, or you might need to know someone in the Ministry of Aviation or the Ministry of Defense in order to even get the certificate to fly in the first place, even if that's not the promulgated regulations. So my point is that there's a lot of shenanigans around the world. Even in places like Germany and the UK, it's much more expensive and much more regulated than we have in America. So if you're like a small business person, you're like a photographer who wants to make some extra money doing real estate photography, or you're like a passionate sort of amateur who wants to go out and showcase American inequality. For example, I was in the States last year, and I wanted to go to Minneapolis and see what are the effects of the riots on the city of Minneapolis from above, right? This was like August, September that I was there. And it's very easy, as you know, to go onto the, what is it, Kitty Hawk app?
Yep.
To be able to immediately receive confirmation from the FAA that you can fly legally in a zone at a particular altitude with your FAA license, which only costs $150 in a very short test to be able to pull off. And then you can then own your commercial images and resell them. So it's a democratic technology with a lot of challenges because it makes a lot of people worried. And the maximization of this amazing technology is possible only with the political ecosystem that comes with sort of a friendly government, right? So I think that that's another component that maybe is lost if you if you don't have like a cross-border or an international perspective on things like this. It's a lot different than being a photojournalist, for example, where maybe, you know, the worst you have to worry about is slander laws or libel laws or something like that. If you were to then photograph someone in a position, you know, for example, outside their home where they have an identifiable face, there might be different laws in, for example, South Africa versus America for that. But the underlying technology of how you use your camera isn't going to be regulated the same way that a drone would be. So it's actually different than other forms of photography. At least that's what I found. And people treat you different at customs as well. So just to end on this point, I mean, if you travel to countries in the developing world, India, Kenya, South Africa, Brazil, you're going to have different experiences at customs between them, and like legally what is required, whether or not they stop you at customs or not, you know. So you might be too scared to bring your drone in because legally it's not allowed without a permit or whatever, even if they won't x-ray your baggage. It's a big reason why I moved to the Mavic and Mavic Minis, actually, is to not deal with that hassle. Because a lot of people don't know what a Mavic Mini looks like all folded up.
It's like a hamburger patty. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like you put headphones around it and it looks like a stereo or something.
Right.
So,
Right.
but whereas you're in the days when everyone had a Phantom 4, like the Phantom 4 was the hot new drone because it had the big sensor in it. And I had one for a while. That was a nightmare because everyone knows what that looks like.
Right.
With the
Yeah.
classic body. Yeah.
So no, I'm actually glad you bring all that up, because, you know, being here in the States, you know, there's always the complaint like, oh, the government regulates too much, or, oh, you know, we're so regulated, and, oh, they're changing the rules again. They're opening
Really,
things up.
you don't know how good you have it, honestly. It's, yeah,
That's
it's
really
good.
good to hear. Really good to hear and share with people. So getting back to kind of imagery, since
Mm.
this is a film festival, um, many of the attendees here are going to be, you know, they're photographers, they're filmmakers, and those kind of things. You know, everybody's thinking, like you had that thing about like Michelle. What what do you think? What are elements that make up a good image or a good photo or video from a drone, in your opinion?
It's a, I've thought a lot about this question because of the fact that I've taken a lot of different kinds of photos for unequal scenes and put almost all of them online at some point. And the ones that have done the best, and you can measure that through metrics of clicks and likes and shares, have been the ones looking straight down. So I've heard different terms of how you refer to that shot, like plumb line or nadir view. But basically, it's when you're flying along and you point the camera straight down, like at a 90-degree perpendicular angle to the Earth. Um, in fact, I'll tell you a quick anecdote. When Unequal Scenes was really taking off, no pun intended, in 2017, I won the Center Project Launch Grant. Center is a photographic organization based in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and they invited me there. And one of the things that I won along with the prize was my choice of portfolio review people. And one of the women who was there was the director of photography for National Geographic, Sarah Lean. And of course I wanted to meet her because who doesn't want to be a National Geographic photographer, right? And I had my portfolio with me. I'd never actually shown my portfolio to anyone in my life. And I brought like all sorts of different photos from unequal scenes. I brought ones looking towards the horizon, a variety low to the earth or whatever. You only have 15 minutes with Sarah Lean, right? So I started showing her all these photos and she was like, hold on, where are the unequal scenes photos? And I was like, these are the unequal scenes photos. These are my photos. She's like, no, the ones looking straight down. And she's like a very like kind of business like woman. She runs National Geographic, where she used to. And she's like, look, I've seen these other photos before. People have been taking photos from helicopters for, 50 years or whatever. But what you're doing, I've never seen before. So show me those and do it quick. And that to me was like a light bulb went off in my head. It was, what's the most impactful way to showcase inequality? And for me, it was the confrontational nature of looking straight down onto the dividing lines that the drone gives you that you almost can't get any other way, because with a helicopter it's really difficult to be able to look straight down. And recently I had the chance to fly with a helicopter in Sao Paulo. It's really difficult and scary to shoot straight down unless the helicopter banks like this, right? So the drone actually gives you that shot that's completely unique. So that's one thing that I would say to aspiring drone pilots is shoot what's unique to your technology. You can't get that shot any other way. The other thing I'd say is there's obvious sort of photographic compositional elements that need to be in place, right? Balance, patterns, lights and darks, and color. Those things have to be in place. To a lesser extent, the rule of thirds. Um, but I think having a strong dividing line in any shot, and by strong dividing line in my shots is usually a fence or a road, but it could be, I don't know, the change between one side of the road being, leaves and the other side being dead trees, or it could be some formation in on a beach between water and sand, or it could be, rocks versus snow or something like that. Some sort of dividing line that compositionally chunks up your image, especially when you're looking straight down, I think is really important, also because of the fact that a lot of stuff spreads through this, right? So, so personally, I feel like really complicated, detail-oriented drone work is actually a waste of time. And I know this because I was lucky enough to get the Hasselblad A6D on loan for a while and shoot in South Africa with that. And I can tell you right now that even though the incredible 100 megapixel detail that you can get of an image with that is great, it doesn't sort of make any more impact on people on a phone than the stuff I shot in 2016 with a 12 megapixel X3 camera on the Inspire 1. So much more important, in my opinion, is looking straight down, getting that unique drone shot, patterns, dividing lines, colors, and balance. And if you can put those things together in a location that people haven't seen before, I feel like that photo is going to go viral. We were talking about the Drone Film Festival. One thing that I thought was done really well by some of the participants in the festival was using those traditional sort of techniques of good photography, but then adding in the extra other layer, not necessarily looking straight down, but for example, in the editing process, creating some sort of new experience for the viewer. And I don't mean to say that drone photography needs to be gimmicky, because it kind of sounds like that's what I'm trying to say right now. It doesn't need to be gimmicky, but it does need to stand out from the crowd, because you lose a lot with drone photography too. You lose the human element. You can't rely on showing portraits of people to get people into your photos anymore. So landscape photography in general and drone photography sort of more specifically, you have to find ways of building that tension, building that emotion inside a scene and making the viewer feel something. That to me is actually easier, but I think maybe for people transitioning from traditional photography, sometimes is forgotten, right? It's not enough to just take a beautiful view of your backyard and set it to like Skrillex, music, and then think that that's going to fly anymore, because it's not 2015 anymore. It's 2021. So people really are, expecting a higher quality out of drone photography now. So I guess that's what I'd say. It's like Pablo Picasso, incredible artist, right? If you ever see his drawings, who can faithfully and authentically execute sort of a realistic view of a human being. And then he finds that sort of element that makes him unique, right? That gets people confronted with changing someone's face and making it cubic or making everything blue or whatever, to then take him to the next level as a genius. Um, yeah, I guess I really hope that like up and coming people spend time paying attention to the basics of photography, but then really sort of taking a step back and thinking, what hits me hard, what makes me feel something with this type of photography.
Right. Yeah. I was always told, anybody can take a photo, but photographers make a photo. It's the idea
Hmm.
of seeing the image and how this is going to convey and what are they going to get from it. Are we going to make photos? Are we going to make a picture, kind of a thing? And it's funny, you were talking about the development of the technology, and that's always great for marketing and sales and stuff like that. And I deal with a lot of you know up and coming pilots and students and stuff, and they're like, oh man, this thing, and it shoots in 8K. And they're like, well, that's amazing, but your audience is going to be looking at it on this, and I don't, the 8K element, one, is going to fill up your card, and two, it's not gonna, they're gonna see it at 1080p, kind of a thing. They're not
Right.
really gonna, you got to think of what the end result is going to be. I mean, so, maybe you don't have to spend all that money right away to get that newest, greatest technology that's out there. You can make some amazing stuff with the technology that you have, because the end user is using technology that you have too.
Here's the tricky thing is that the success I had with Unequal Scenes would not have been possible unless I took the leap, and it was a financial leap, to purchase new technology, right? So I don't want to tell people, don't use new technology, whatever is flashy and new, just focus on what you have, like your cell phone or your Nikon D90 camera that was sort of grandfathered to you or whatever. Because sometimes using the new flashy technology does get you noticed, and it got me noticed. But that was a learning experience that wasn't planned. And so I think if you are listening to this interview and trying to get something educational out of it, spend time thinking about what the new technologies are that will take your photography into a level that actually adds value to the world. Because people really are seeking value. I think that, it's 2021, like everyone is a photographer now. Everyone is making videos and putting them on Instagram TV or whatever, right? But not everyone is adding value. And I guarantee you that's rewarded. It's rewarded in sponsors. By that, I mean donors and commissions once they see that you're adding value. And it's rewarded in clicks and likes and shares as well when people say, oh, this person's doing something different. Like I'm seeing this from a new angle, a new perspective. One of the spectacular, I don't want to call it failures, but gambles that didn't pay off recently has been 360 video and virtual reality. That, at the same time as I was shooting Unequal Scenes, was seen as sort of the next big new technology, and it hasn't gone anywhere. So, I think part of that too was it wasn't that the technology wasn't ready, but it's what new value are you adding with 360 video? Like, are you creating something that people couldn't get in any other way and are willing to sort of pay for or be, spend their time looking at? The most compelling stuff that I saw with VR wasn't being replicated like in a large way, and I think the technology eventually sort of petered out because of that. I'm sure it'll make some sort of renewed appearance, in the next couple of years or whatever. But I don't know what to say, like what the next thing coming is, and it's really presumptuous to just tell people like think of the next big thing and then do it, obviously. But just I'll reiterate the point is that Unequal Scenes was rewarded because of the fact that people had never seen inequality side by side, looking straight down, the way that I had done over and over and over. There were individual photos of inequality. The notable one was that one in Sao Paulo that he's now my friend, Tuca Vieira, took from a helicopter. But there was no comprehensive project looking straight down in that comprehensive way of side by side of inequality that people had done before. And it I don't know, it was just like it was an idea that really paid off. It wasn't the first idea I had, and it wasn't the last idea I had, but it was the most successful one. So you're going to have to try over and over. Um, but I think if you follow the principles and you sort of are a smart person who's constantly, iterating, thinking, wanting to be a better photographer, eventually you'll get something that you'll be proud of. It might not actually go viral, but at least you'll be proud of it.
And that's the important part, you know.
Yeah.
What just kind of and kind of wrap things up here. What are some projects that you're working on? Are you continuing with Unequal Scenes, or what's your next project that you're thinking about doing?
So Unequal Scenes, I just came out of Brazil. I'm literally in Mexico right now after 3 months in Brazil. And that was a really eye-opening experience to me because the complexity of inequality in Brazil was way deeper than I was expecting. And I'm waiting to sort of release those images before I turn it into a more comprehensive research project. So yeah, excuse me, Unequal Scenes for sure is going to continue. It's still got a lot of support. There's a lot of places I still want to go. And I think a lot to do that doesn't have to do with drones. So interviews, research papers, books, stuff like that. But I've been wanting to sort of expand out from Unequal Scenes for a while and have made some forays, which you can see on my website, into projects like Desire Paths, which is kind of like looking at the pathways that people wear into the earth, as they don't necessarily follow sidewalks and roads, they cut across them. And what does that sort of make you feel like? What are the emotional impacts of seeing sort of the human experience written on the Earth's surface? I have a new project called Narratives of Displacement that I'm working with other Atlantic Fellows with, looking at sort of the experience of displaced people around the world. So I don't necessarily see myself only as a photographer. So a lot of this stuff is kind of like project management, research, creative communication, all mixed up into the same person, which makes it difficult to sort of explain what I do to some people, although some people get it and reward me for that, which is nice. But I'm not a commercial photographer who makes 100% of my income off of commercial work either. So I'm in a bit of a different place than a lot of my friends who work for example, news organizations or commercial work. And I like that. I like being where I'm at. So it's a process of sort of exploring the world, like I said in the beginning, of trying to understand the systemic nature of how the world's organized. And I think that that's a lifetime career for me. So as long as I'm getting enough to eat and there's a roof over my head, I'll probably be doing something similar, because I don't think I'm going back to a 9 to 5, unfortunately, anytime soon, which as I get older, I kind of sweat a little bit every time I sort of think about retiring, but it's worked out so far. I just turned 40, by the way. I just turned 40 January 9th. So I'm also getting a bit long in the tooth to be sort of like this traveling photographer dude or whatever, but we'll see. I think teaching is in my cards as well at some point. So maybe we should talk in another couple of years.
Hey, definitely. Yeah. So a happy belated birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
But I was going to ask you this because thinking back now, where we are today, where you are today, and thinking back on that surf outing, that you did, just as an aside, like, oh, let's take this drone up and let's take a picture. I mean, could you even imagine how this would grow? It wouldn't even at 2015, 2016, the extent of the growth of where it kind of created this new frontier, new career for you. I mean, that's kind of a hard to think of.
Well, no.
Yeah. I mean, it's because you're forging a new area.
I mean, thank you for asking that, because I've never been asked that before. And no, it's so unbelievable when I look back on the last 4 years, based on my previous career up to that point, that I almost can't attribute it to anything else but like fate. I'm not a religious person, and I'm not trying to turn this into a weird conversation about fate and religion, but man, there was something like extremely serendipitous, lucky, fateful about that day, taking that photo at that moment, that I really have tried to listen to. And the lesson that I constantly take away from it is do what's in your heart, even if it doesn't have a path of making you money or a clear sort of path forward in terms of work or anything like that. If you see yourself as an artist, or you see yourself as having a voice that you need to express, you have to get it out there. And it's like a reinforcement that that was even inside me, to have people want to see more of it, right? So it, to me, my photographs are also extremely personal, in a way that I'm only now starting to understand how other photographers refer to their own photographs as personal, because it's not painting. You can't see brush strokes. It's not the most personal art form from a traditional point of view of seeing someone have a craft and sweat over like scraping the wood to create the block print or whatever a traditional artist was seen as before the technology of cameras came along. But it's still an art form, right? And so there's like part of me inside those images, all my sort of vulnerabilities and desires for trying to have an authentic voice, um, that geez, I shudder to think, if I had like not had the courage to go out that day and throw the drone in the trunk, or the desperation because my career wasn't going very well and I really needed to try something new, um, I would have never found, and I would have continued to just work for other people.
Right.
There's no shame in being a skilled operator. It's great to be able to feed yourself, but I always saw myself as something a little bit more than that, right? To be an artist, to be a true photographer, I think you've got to have your own voice, and you've got to go out on a limb sometimes and create new work. Otherwise, you're creating someone else's vision, and that led me to this project. It's hopefully going to lead me to more projects, and yeah, that's the lesson, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great. And again, it's a great example of, for people just follow what they want to do, follow their heart, follow their interests, kind of a thing, and see where it leads. Well, I don't want to take up much more of your time, but I do want to thank you for taking the time to talk about this and talk about drones and what you've done in Unequal Spaces, and share some insight with our attendees. So I appreciate that. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. This has been fun.